Hello and welcome to the 10 Principles of Experiential Brain-Based Learning. Welcome back to Module 3. Very happy to have you here with us today. Let's go ahead and start with a deep mindful yawn. I will ring our mindfulness bell. And remember to feel that deep yawn all the way into your stomach and beyond if you're able. So the deeper the yawn, the greater relaxation you will feel. It was nice, wasn't it? We're getting used to the deep mindful yawns now. So the big question is, how long should we study? How long should we remain highly focused in our central executive network to create the best learning environment and retention? The information must be presented to the learning centers of our brain in very small quantities. And the reason is because our memory encoding can only deal with one or two ideas at a time. When we speak, our brain holds on to about 7 to 10 words. Therefore, it's really important that we use short study times to obtain the best that we can out of our learning. So we definitely want to keep our learning sessions brief. Again, you can only retain about 10 words, which is one brief sentence, by holding it and working it in your working memory for about 10 seconds. So when we say the sentence, your brain can only retain about 10 words, one brief sentence. We've got 11. You're going to retain that sentence better, knowing that it was just in a brief sentence. The dogs are barking, so we get to be nicely distracted by them. And when it comes to learning something new, we have key information, and that key information needs to be presented as briefly and concisely as possible. Your brain needs time to absorb it and encode it into your long-term memory. If you remember in Module 1, we talked about it's kind of as though your brain downloads, although it's really encoding. With the way computers are set up, it's really easy to understand you're downloading, because we all know what that means with getting that information onto our computer. And it's not exactly really what you're doing, what your brain is doing, but your brain is just really absorbing all of that information into it, and it's deciphering it and encoding it into our long-term memory sections of our brain. And to do that, you really are going to be using all the various parts of your brain. So we said this earlier, that it's a myth that yawning means you're not paying attention. I believe we shared that in Module 2. When you are in a lecture, and it's a pretty intense lecture, the information is all brand new to you. It's quite the opposite. You are, in fact, paying an essential amount of attention to the material, and yawning is the best way for your brain to absorb that new information that you've just gained. So when you get the urge to yawn, and you are in a lecture, you're in a seminar, you're in a workshop, you're taking one of the courses here or you're taking this course, yawn. It is so good for you and will really help your brain remember that information that you have just learned that is new for you. Let's go ahead and take a moment to take that deep mindful yawn. And go ahead and add that slow motion movement. And it can really be any part of your body. One woman I worked with, she wiggled her toes very slowly. And after her doing that, I find that I do that a lot at night as I'm getting ready for bed. So now we are deeply relaxed with our deep mindful yawn, listening to our resonance of the mindfulness bell and our super, super slow stretch. We will move on to daydreaming. You've got to remember this when you were a kid and you're in grade school and you find yourself just kind of staring out the window. You're actually doing something, you were doing something very, very good for your brain. When you learn new information, new material, you'll want to take a break about every 20 minutes to mindfully yawn or daydream. Mindful breaks, those are going to assist you to really remember the material that you've recently gained. By all means, stare out the window, gaze, have a daydream. They are beautiful for you. And yes, I can remember being in grade school and they're like, Kelly, pay attention. And I was taking a daydream. At the end of each module, go ahead and close your eyes for a minute or two and really allow your mind to wander or daydream. This is going to be essential for you to absorb new ideas and embed them into your long-term memory. Researchers call it a resting state. And it is, in a sense, exactly what you're doing. You're just resting your mind. And here, here's where I was talking about earlier, getting into trouble in class. And the teacher didn't understand is that daydreaming, that little moment that you took to really relax and daydream, you might have even been daydreaming about the material you had just learned. It is essential to our learning to allow our minds to wander. And here the dogs go again. We've got a park across the street, and people love to play basketball there. They'll play till 11 or midnight. Most nights, doesn't matter the time of year either. Yeah. So we mind wandered to the basketball court at the park across the street. So you guys can all imagine that. And imagine hearing the basketball bouncing on the court. So allowing our mind to wander really allows the goal-oriented processes of your brain to relax while the other areas integrate the information in creative and intuitive ways. And this right here is where you're using every aspect of your brain. So when you are daydreaming, you're in your default mode network, your imagination center. And when you are then integrating that information in creative and intuitive ways, you're in your salience network. And just prior to that, mind wandering, You are in the goal-oriented process, which is your central executive functioning. So it all comes together, and you can see where we really do use 100% of our brain. This top image here, the brain scan to your right, shows how improvision and creative activities stimulate the areas associated with innovative decision making. And that's over here in the yellow areas. And the use of previously learned information, we're going to see that in this image down here below. The areas that are in blue, right over here, this suggests a lack of creative experiences. And when we have this, we end up with a bit of depression. So again, you remember us talking about it earlier. Oops, let's go back to this. And we saw that depressed brain. This is just another angle of that. And again, if you know somebody who has clinical depression, or maybe you're experiencing the clinical depression, remember it's really just a hormone. It's a hormone that either you're not processing properly, or they're not processing properly, or you're simply not getting enough of it, which is where I like to pull in a good analogy of type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is your body doesn't absorb insulin, the hormone insulin, the way that someone who doesn't have type 2 absorbs and processes the insulin in their body. When you have type 1, so we'll correlate type 1 with the clinical depression, that hormone is just gone. It's absent, and it might be slowly decreasing. And that's where we really have to replace that entire hormone into our body so that it can function normally and healthy. So it's a really good example to use the type 1 and type 2 diabetes when talking about depression and that hormone that's missing when it's clinical depression. If you just have a depressed mood, then you will find great benefit and see uplifting results using the yawning and the mindfulness spell and that slow motion movement. You'll find that your mood is going to lift. Should it not, that's the point when you need to think, okay, are the hormones working properly in my brain? And if you come to the conclusion they're not, go see your doctor, and they can get you on medication that will help push out that hormone. And pushing out that hormone is like what happens with type 2 diabetes when the body doesn't process the insulin properly. It's making it, it's just not processing it. And I love that analogy for talking about depression, because it's really just a medical condition, no different than any of the diabetes that are out there, the type 1, the type 2, the LADA. There's a couple other different ones as well. We are at the end of this module. We will be moving on to our next module. So before we do that, I want you to take a moment to take a deep mindful yawn, a mindful slow movement stretch, and a nice daydream. take a little bit longer to daydream on your own, I will see you over at in module 4.